Hey there! Welcome to this episode of Canadian Retro Things. A little while ago I made a video showing you all of the working retro computers that I have in my collection. So I decided, why not show you all the working retro consoles I have in my collection? And once again, I'm going to rate them on how nostalgic they are for me and how much I use them from day to day. And if you're interested in that computer episode, well, I'll put a link down there and one up here somewhere. And once again, I'm counting these consoles as retro if they're pre-1995, so there's no modern releases or re-releases. This is the Intellivision game system by Mattel Electronics. Originally released into a test market in December of 1979 and sold right up until 1990. It sold over 3 million units in its first 3 years. It's a gaming unit that was designed to be modular. There was a full keyboard promised and after a number of delays finally released. This was almost the downfall of the unit because a number of people bought the machine just because of the promised personal computer upgrade. There was also an add-on speech synthesizer giving voice to supported games. Although this was not the first 8-bit competitor of the Atari 2600, it was, at the time, the first one to pose a serious threat. Growing up, I never knew anyone that actually owned an Intellivision. In fact, as far as I can remember, I never saw one of these in person until I picked this unit up at auction about a year ago. Therefore, the nostalgia gets about a 1. It's a gaming console that I knew of, but never played. However, I have found that I really like the games on this. Especially this Dungeons & Dragons title that I have. I play it quite regularly. Therefore, the current usage gets a 6. Here is the ColecoVision. Originally released in August of 1982 and discontinued in 1985 when Coleco pulled out of the video game market. This is another modular gaming unit that had peripherals available such as the Atari 2600 expansion, allowing you to play most 2600 games, a driving wheel, a roller controller, the Atom Computer expansion, which turned the Coleco into part of the Coleco Atom Computer. There was also an unreleased Super Game module that would have added a tape-style loader as well as additional RAM. This game console is credited as a major influence of Takao Sawano as he developed the NES. The ColecoVision was the first game console that I owned. My parents bought it for the family back in 1983, and I played it a lot. I was, however, the only person that I knew that owned a ColecoVision. So I wasn't able to do things like trade games on the playground like all my friends that owned Ataris did. But it didn't matter to me, because I loved each and every game that I had for this system. Therefore, the nostalgia gets a 9. Although, it's odd that I don't play this quite as much as I thought I would. Maybe because the games that I have on things like the Intellivision are ones that I had never played before. I tend to play them a little more often. But I do still play this quite a bit, so it gets a 5. I play it quite a bit, and I do love it. Now for the Atari 2600. Originally released in 1977, it continued selling in one form or another until about 1991. Over its lifetime, there were about 30 million units sold. This is the home game console that is credited with popularizing the use of microprocessor-driven hardware that utilized ROM cartridges for programs, something that was first done by the Fairchild Channel F in 1976. It is also credited with being a contributor to the video game crash of 1983. This is blamed on the amount of money put into the E.T. game, which was a commercial flop. As a child, a number of my friends owned Atari 2600s, and we played them a lot. We would sit in each other's basements playing the games until you finally got a high score. Then you had to take a Polaroid of that for proof and for bragging rights. Then you were the king of that game. Until a few days later when somebody else would beat your high score, and then it was back to the basement and back to chasing another high score. Therefore, the nostalgia on this gets an 8. Unfortunately, to hook these units up, you have to use one of these switch boxes, which generally give a very crappy picture. Therefore, for the use of this right now, I only give it, I would say, a 3. This is the Atari 2600 Junior. There isn't much to be said about it that hasn't been said about its big brother, the Atari 2600. It was released in 1986 as a cost-reduced, updated 2600 that played all of the old games in a smaller package. Growing up, I didn't know anybody that had one of these, but I had heard of them. And it is an Atari, so there is a nostalgia factor there. So this gets a 4 for nostalgia. And one of the really nice things about it is that it has the RCA plug on the back, so you can use an RCA to coaxial adapter to use it on the CRT TVs like these should be played on, in my opinion. It's much easier to hook up than using those switch boxes. So for the current use, this is the Atari I definitely use more, so it gets a 5. And here's the NES, or Nintendo Entertainment System. First released in 1983 in Japan as the Famicom. It was released in North America in 1985. It was discontinued, the NES version, in 1995. The Famicom continued in Japan until 2003. Over its lifetime, the combined sales of these units are just about 62 million. The Nintendo marketing department stated that by the year 1990, 30% of American households owned an NES, as compared to 23% that owned personal computers. These machines were popular, to say the least, and helped rebound the home game market from the 1983 crash. Interestingly, I didn't know anybody in the 1980s that had an NES. It wasn't until I was in university in the mid-1990s that I met anybody with one, and then it was mostly beer and Tecmo Bowl. It was fun, but it wasn't a major part of my childhood, so for nostalgia, it gets a 3. As for daily playing, I do like playing it. I just don't go out of my way to play it. I'm not sure why, but for daily playing, it also gets a 3. And here's the Socrates Educational Video System. There's not much to say about this, but if you're interested in it, check out the link to my video about it. I'd never heard of it until I got it in a lot from an auction last year, so it gets a 0 for nostalgia. If you watched my video on it, you'll know why I'm also giving it a 0 for usage. That just leaves how these games scored. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I do have to say that no matter where these consoles scored in the rankings, I do enjoy collecting games for each and every one of them, even the not-so-great games. So remember, if you liked it, you can give me a thumbs up, you can subscribe to the channel, or you can comment below. It would all be greatly appreciated. And if you didn't enjoy the video, then thanks for watching all the way to the end. I really do appreciate the view. So I've got nothing left to say, but see you next time, and remember to enjoy those retro games because, well, I know I do.